Woody's system dropped. There
Yeah.
we go. All right. Sorry about that, guys. It's like a great way to get things rolling. So we got Rick and LeGrand. We got Darren here in the studio with me, which is fun. David Archer's off in South Carolina. It's like the full house here. So we're excited to talk about goals. We're coming here towards the end of the year, and I hope that everybody is enjoying the holiday season, getting some time with family and good food, or at least have plans to do so, because that's kind of what it's all about here. And we're thinking about, what are we going to do in the next year photographically? What are some goals? And before we take off with that, Rick, you got announcements about the next office hours?
Yeah, the next office hours will be January 10th. And I think we mentioned last time, I'm just double checking that I've got the right day. Yes, January 10th, and that will be a gallery. And what we'd like you to do is to submit your favorite, your best, a photo that has resonance that you took in 2022 that sort of says something to you. And Woody will work on getting the gallery up sometime. It might be up today, but it might also be up later this week. And when you submit your image, if you want to put a little bit about what you shot it with, and a little bit about the image. I mean, a lot of images are straightforward, but it's always good to have a little story. So that'll be the 10th. One image per person, please. And I believe Woody wants you to put your name at the beginning of the file name. So
right,
makes it
easier. You can even
for
just
us.
name the photo your name too.
Yeah,
that's a good way to go.
Yeah. So that's
we're going to go through those images as a group and take a look at them, and whichever one we think stands out the most, we're going to give away a Case magnetic circular polarizer in your choice of 82 or 112 millimeter.
Nice.
Wow. A little incentive there.
Yeah. So, and we're in the midst of rolling out the 2023 workshops. And right now we have the Glacier workshop is up. That's July 7th to the 12th, I believe. The Moab workshop sold out as quickly as the Charleston one did. There is a waiting list for that. There's one spot left in the printing workshop in the first week in February. It's listed as a beginning workshop, but almost everyone really wants the intermediate one. So we're doing a special sort of thing on the day before the first printing workshop, where people who really want to know about various printers, I'll walk through that. But the printing workshops are really sort of more hands-on, small lab type stuff. So there's one left there.
Really small group. It's a 3-to-1 instructor-student ratio. So it's just going to be 6 people, and Rick and I here in the studio.
And that actually should be a lot of fun. And one of the reasons we're keeping it small is because we want to make sure that, this is the first time we've done this workshop. And we imagine there'll be some refinement to it. But it's our thought that we will have more regular print workshops over time.
Yep.
And so hudsonhenry.com.
Oh, Cuba.
I was just going to say hudsonhenry.com/workshops. There's one spot left in the second Cuba workshop.
No, and there two. We had a couple drop out.
No, we had one person come back in. I think there's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I believe there's one left. There might be two left.
That's why you're the workshop coordinator.
That's right. And then we have one workshop that has not been posted yet. The workshop coordinator is probably shouldn't be in office hours and should be coordinating the Oregon Coast workshop. That will probably go live sometime next week. We expect that one will sell out almost immediately. That's going to be a 12-person workshop. CJ is coming with us on that one. And I think there are 4 or 5 spots left in Glacier. We also expect that one will sell out. That one's a pricier workshop than our normal ones, but that's because
And
it
David's
includes
coming with us
lodging.
on that one.
Yes,
Yeah.
David is going to be a co-instructor on the Glacier workshop with us as well. So I think that's it. The Coast workshop will go out. People who signed up to be notified about that workshop and alumni will get an email about that. As I said, that's 12 people. We do expect that one to sell out quickly. That's a 4-day workshop. Starts on the 28th of August next year. So I think that's all we've got about workshops. They said hudsonhenry.com/workshop has all of the currently open ones. And if you, Yellowstone, I forgot Yellowstone. We are doing Yellowstone next year. There's about 4 spots left in that one as well. I spoke with people at the park about the construction and everything, and all the roads are open again. They're closed for the winter, some of them are, but they're expecting the park to be back at full capacity on opening day next year. So we had to move the Yellowstone workshop to the Tetons last fall, and there's still a fair amount of interest in us doing that. And it's a great workshop. So I think that's it.
We're going to have some fun next year. There's no two ways about it. So, well, I thought, so taking off on this, let's jump into the goals for next year, photographic goals and plans. I think we've got a number of questions and people who commented on their own goals and ideas, but should we jump through and just have you and David and Darren and me chat really quick about what our goals for the next year are?
Sure.
Well, you've been talking. Why don't you just start, Rick? What do you look?
My big goal for next year, to be honest, is a project I've been working on for far too long now, which is redoing my portfolio. I think one of the things that is a helpful thing to do every few years is for you to go through your photo library, sort of look at it with a fresh eye. We're all getting better, both in terms of photographically in the field and editing, and things change over time. And, last time I did my portfolio was in 2013. And what I do is, my end goal is to actually have 16 by 20 prints of all of my portfolio. My goal is to pick 20, no more than 20 photos that if someone said, hey, show me your work, that I could show them, and I have a little, Lightroom mobile album that I can show on my iPad. But it's important to me to have prints. So that's kind of my overarching goal. I've been working on this project for, it started late in the pandemic and was like, just haven't been able to get around to it. So that's sort of my big one for next year.
That's a good one.
And I've been drawn to minimalism in my photography and over the last few years. Like that's sort of what speaks to me. And my goal is actually to go find some photographers who shoot minimalistic and sort of study their work and think a little bit more thoughtfully about it out in the field. So
like that.
Yeah.
And that wasn't going to be my stated goal for this morning, but I'm gonna take a cue from you and work on my own portfolio too. And we need to get a group of images of yours and David's and CJ's and mine, all the people that work with the workshops, up on our website, because we nuked our old gallery of images and right now it's just devoid of our imagery. Yeah. So it'd be a good place to showcase some of those portfolios.
It's a good project for everyone, I think, because it causes you to go through your library and, with a different eye.
Yep.
One of the reasons I'm doing it is because when I went through my portfolio images 3 or 4 years ago, I was like, wow, I haphazardly threw a couple of more recent ones in that I'm like, why would those be in my portfolio? And then looking at some of the older images, I find two things. One, well, that's not really what I would consider my best work, or
Mhm.
I really like that photograph, but I need to edit it differently.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you know, the my library is full of old, over sharpened, over glowing, oversaturated photographs that, really,
Yeah.
really could use to be re-edited, or some of them just deleted. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, sort and effect.
Exactly.
yeah.
I think that, if you're looking back at something you did 5 years ago and you're completely satisfied with it, then you're not on the right trajectory. How about you, Darren?
Yeah, I probably should update my portfolio too. That's on there. I think the one that that kind of sticks out to me is to get out and shoot, like to put it into practice. Like right before everything shut down, I had made this list a couple of years back of like, hey, it kind of sticks out to me is to get out and shoot, like to put it into practice. Like right before everything shut down, I had made.
We're having audio problems.
Yeah.
Hey, Hudson, we can't hear you. You're muted.
All right, we're not muted anymore.
It's all about getting out there and putting it into practice.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Thanks for that update. Yeah, no, and getting out there more is, that's kind of the key to everything. So, how about David?
Well, I've just redone my website over the last couple of weeks, so that's
Nice.
kind of done. But I basically just put up some new photos and took down some old ones. I need to refine it tighter into fewer images, to be a true portfolio.
Yeah.
But I guess that's a step in that direction.
Hmm.
And I guess going forward, I want to concentrate a little more on the details and just less winging everything and playing it by ear, which I know is the jazz musician approach to a lot of things. But a lot of
Do
things
what you
I can do instinctively, but if somebody asks me exactly what I'm doing, I would have to stop and think about it. So I want to tighten that up a little bit, travel a little more, and try to do better images on the trips when I'm with other people. I notice that my best work by far is when I'm all by myself.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I need to be able to focus more on what I'm doing at the time and tune out things.
Yeah, that ability to multitask, is not my most talented sort of strong suit either, but over time.
And of course, in the workshop situation, where there are other things we worry about too, that the responsibilities, driving and coordinating and answering questions and things too. So it's all a balance, but I do want to get better at that.
Well, for those of us teaching the workshops, for me, the goal, I'm always excited to get great images, but my bigger goal is working with other people to make sure they're getting the great images.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. But when I'm out with the group, like say we're pre-scouting, like we had a really wonderful time, David and CJ and Rick and I spending a few days around the Owens Valley, just dialing in what the scenes were looking like before the workshop began. Yeah, and Charlie, and that was fun working as a group, and I often feed off the energy of other photographers when we're working together. So yeah,
I think I've said this before, but one of the things that I truly missed in moving out to Eastern Oregon was, on a regular basis, I would get together with local Portland photographers. We would go, Hudson, you were part of that group, our friend Duncan, and just other people. And we would go out, sort of shoot. We'd go have dinner. We'd look at what was on the back of our screens. We'd bring prints and things we were working on. And I think that's a hugely gratifying thing if you can find a group of people that you can shoot with, every once in a while even. but people to sort of talk about, to show your work to, I think that's a wonderful thing.
It's been one of the most gratifying things to me about running these workshops over the last number of years, is watching little groups like that form from the workshops. People that live on opposite sides of the country, like Al and Dave are a great example, where they get together for trips. They go off to Sun Valley together. They go here, they go there. And it's like these people have met through a shared love of this activity that we all do, and then get together and get in these creative little bubbles together, doing their own thing. I love that.
Yeah.
Similar theme, like doing some of the soccer photography that I do a lot of, is I have two kind of companions who have been able to come and shoot. And so when we all put our stuff together, we can see all three of us got the same moment, but from different places, with different focal lengths, with different perspectives, and just being able to like look through all of that and go, I really like that version of this.
Right.
I was over there and you were over there, and we got the same thing, but completely different perspective is really, really cool.
Yes.
It's a very similar idea.
I would say one thing that I hear, and I saw in a lot of the questions or the comments about people's goals for 2023, is a lot of them focus, I guess pun intended, on the camera. And I think you have to understand that the camera is only part of the issue. It's part of the process. It's
a tool.
Editing is big, but learning to see in the field. I've heard people say, well, I go out and I take 1,000 photographs, and that's wrong. I don't want to be doing that. It's like, well, there's nothing wrong with taking 1,000 photographs. The question is, how do you make sure that you are getting the photographs that you want? And some of that is seeing, some of that is thinking differently when you're in the field. It's all well and good to practice using your camera. I think we all could benefit from that. But thinking too about what types of images that you'd like to take. What are you drawn to, and how do you get to those places that you're drawn to? Looking at other people's work. I think that's a huge component of becoming a better photographer. And just sort of the thing about when you're out somewhere without your camera, or the only camera you have is your phone camera, still be looking for photographs. Don't think about it from the perspective that you're going to miss that great photograph. You don't know when you're going to get that great photograph.
It's a game I play with the kids. We'll be driving to go off to do something, and we're all in a rush in the car, and I'll be like, wow, look at that light, guys, look at those clouds. We could, if we were able to stop right here, think how we could put that church spire with those clouds to make a picture, and I'm kind of constantly, I don't know, my brain just does that. Even when there's no possible opportunity to get out and make an image, I'm always thinking about, well, I could look at that. That'd be interesting. I think, and sometimes it's so compelling that you think, whoa, on the next foggy day, I want to come back here and I'll just take a cell phone shot, or a quick video with like description. And that way it's in my Google Photos. I'm a pixel guy, and, I can search for that or tag it or put it into Lightroom and tag it like you do, revisit. And it's the constant. You don't have to have the camera in your hand to be thinking photographically. I was going to talk really quickly about a more technical kind of goal I have for myself, which I sort of stumbled upon this last year. A lot of people know that when I was in Costa Rica, our good friend Elizabeth Brooks she dastardly put one of these little Leica Q2s in my hand while we were out photographing, and I sort of fell in love with shooting with it and also the images that came out of it. So it's become my little camera I have in my backpack all the time. And, it being a Leica, I started putting it in the black and white mode where I'm shooting a color RAW file, but shooting a black and white JPEG. And I just fell in love with looking at the world in the middle of the day in black and white. And we even have been talking about this in our workshops. Middle of the day, we're out scouting. looking at locations, and no matter what kind of camera you've got a monochrome or a black and white JPEG mode where you can be looking through that viewfinder, capturing a black and white JPEG as well as a RAW file. And so I'm resigned. I'm going to share my screen just for a second, just a few things from this last year, jumping in here that were just kind of compelling to me. Like the light had already kind of gone bad in the Tetons out at the Molten Barns, and yet, you know, this wouldn't have been great in color. It's getting pretty late in the morning, but throwing it into black and white and playing around with the trees and just some different scenes and looking through that viewfinder in black and white, I just start seeing these dramatic things. It's almost like you have, you know, I was always kind of drawn to some of the people that are out shooting infrared, but you can do a lot of similar things in just straight black and white.
I just printed that image.
Did you? The tree with the road?
Yeah, I'm bringing it with me. So
now that's with the polarizer too. I threw my case 82 millimeter on an adapter on that little Leica and spun it. It just popped that's fall color, you know, the last of the fall color on that tree there. Just a dramatic sky. We're driving around scouting. This is in Yellowstone at the fountain paint pots, just these dead trees in the springs there. Or Glacier National Park, you know, just some of the drama that you can do when you're out in the middle of the day, you know, when you'd normally be waiting for the light to get good for your photography, flipping into black and white mode, all of a sudden you can do, you know, there's so much drama, and I love being able to see it through my viewfinder. So I want to keep working at that. And the other thing that I've really enjoyed doing, you know, is you look at this scene, and I was thinking about time lapse when we set up here. This is in Glacier when Rick and I were laying out, designing and scouting and dialing in our workshop this year for the 2023 Glacier workshop. This is up at many glaciers. And I was looking at these clouds thinking about time lapse. And then it sort of struck in my head, well, you know, when I was in Patagonia with our group, we were out on the workshop a few years back, just before COVID. We had an evening where we were photographing at Lago Pijo and Torres de Paine, and I thought the sunset was going to be amazing. And then it was a bit of a dud. This is about as colorful as it got, but creating, you know, putting some neutral density on and shooting at 120 seconds, it's suddenly it got so interesting. And then, you know, I whipped the Leica out and framed the scene up thinking about, well, you know, black and white's beautiful right now. And then somehow that other scene popped into my head, and sort of those shots that people do in black and white of buildings and metropolitan areas. And I just threw a neutral density on and started playing with, you know, 120 seconds with the black and white and the clouds moving through the scene. So I'm thinking longer exposures, black and white, middle of the day, instead of just, you know, waiting for the light to get good like we've done so much. My goal is to spend a little more time in the middle of the day thinking a little more creatively in black and white. And as Rick said, you know, it's not all about the camera. You can do this with whatever camera you happen to be shooting, from a Nikon Z50 to, you know, a Sony A6500 to a Fuji, you know, X100 to whatever you happen to have in your pocket. It's just about thinking about the possibilities. And I will say that the tool, that ability to look through a digital viewfinder and see the world in black and white, is revolutionary and cool and feels like cheating.
But one of the best things that happened to me in college was taking black and white photo classes, because it makes you think. You can't use the color of the sunset to create the image. You have to look at the texture, the shape, the composition. What are you going to do to make that work? And it is cheating now to be able to look at it that way, because you're still looking through a full color viewfinder on a film camera, right? But it makes you think about it in a different way.
It does.
Was slowing down and working.
And your phones have a black and white mode as well. I mean,
absolutely.
You know, so I would say the black and white was kind of the revelation for me last year as well. I've always struggled with black and white. Largely because you couldn't, you know, it's like I somehow couldn't get across the bridge into that Ansel Adams, Cartier-Bresson, you know, seeing the world in tones. You know, it kind of intimidated me, but you know, I spent a lot of time doing the same thing, putting my camera in black and white mode and, you know, just practicing out there in the field. So,
Mhm.
I had a couple of comments over in the Zoom chat. You know, one thing that Chris Traylor says, I feel relatively comfortable with the gear. I struggle with the vision. I want to look more at the work of photographers I admire and figure out why. And that I, you know, at the risk of shamelessly plugging this book that we published, Ben Long and I published last year, The Practicing Photographer.
It's a great book.
This book was designed not to be read cover to cover. It's very thin, but it's designed to sort of have a bunch of very short meditations on things you can do to sort of improve yourself as a photographer. And you know, Ben and I have for years been preaching you need to look at other photographers' work. You know, I don't know if you can see I have a bookshelf behind here that's got probably about 60 volumes of photography. I've got another bookshelf there and another one at the house. I probably have a couple hundred, you know, and mostly books that I picked up in, you know, used on Amazon or in a used bookstore, used at Powell's. But just spending time looking at photographs that have been curated, which is what a lot of these books are, you know, gives you a sense of what type of work you like and what you don't like, which sort of helps inform, you know, you start to look at things from a different perspective. You start to try and understand what it is about this guy's photographs or this woman's photographs that you love, you know, what that makes you want to go out and shoot. You know, so I will say, you know, this book, as I said, shameless plug, over on completedigitalphotography.com. I've got it on sale. The print version I think is 10 and the PDF is 8. And it's not a book for everybody, I guarantee. It's not, there's nothing technical in it, but you know, it's got a bunch of good exercises that you can use, especially without a camera in your hand. So
It's a great book. I can't recommend it more highly. I keep
put a
looking
link
back on it.
I mean, I think that the ebook I think is great. It looks just like the regular book, and you can read it on anything. It's unprotected. So I put a link in the Zoom chat. If you want to put one in the YouTube chat.
Already did.
Yeah, I just
Thanks.
watched him do it.
So anyway, I looking at other questions. You know, Gary has our good friend Gary has a question that has been upvoted. He says, as a newbie, you know, production, post-production, the tools for both. How do you come to a balance of all? And how would you frame that as a goal for, how do you get better at the post-production side of things?
You get better at well, it's the same as the shooting side of things. It's practice, practice, practice.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
One thing I would suggest is, with respect to editing, understand that the first part of editing is culling. And that your goal should be to find those photos that are worth editing.
And I've done multiple videos on that. If you go through my YouTube feed, if you and search culling, or if you're a On One Plus member and you go to the Plus library and search for Hudson culling, I have some great thoughts on that. How to drill down from, you just went out and shot 3,000 images of herons at your wildlife refuge. You know, I think you should be able to get to the 10 you want to work on within an hour before you touch a slider on any of them. And I've got a process to help with that. So,
but I would also argue that you go out for an afternoon and you shoot 50 photographs
Yep.
The thing that I see is that someone starts going through their library and they get on the 5th photo and they're like, oh, I'm gonna edit this. And it's like, two photographs later, it might be a much more successful photograph. And, why edit? As we talk about in the workshops, we know how to edit. What we want to be able to do is look at an image and determine whether it's worth editing, whether it's something. We're not even talking portfolio quality here. We're talking about something that you want to show someone because you think it's a good photograph. So I would argue that the very first thing you need to do if you want to get better as with the sliders is get better at choosing those photographs that make sense for you. And the other thing, one of the things that I've been, sort of this minimalist, I shoot a lot of low contrast photographs, especially out on the Columbia. And they're very difficult photographs to edit. And some of it is I was working on a couple of photos this past weekend, trying to see if I could get a print because I wanted to show some stuff for the print workshop, and realized that I'm not going to be able to do this. That these images, while they appeal to me, are pretty much uneditable from the perspective of the data that I have. And what that said to me was, next time I go out to these places where I shoot, I need to think completely differently about how I'm exposing for the scene in front of me. And those are things that you get. I mean, Gary, you said, how do you balance it? And it's like, it is a balance. You have to figure that balance out, and some of that is with the way that you shoot, the things that you like to shoot, and it's learning the tools, but
I think you and I are saying exactly the same thing. No matter how many frames you shoot, the important thing is identifying what little handful of them really deserves editing. And then doing that shortly after shooting so that you think about the settings, it's still in your mind. What did I do? Oh, what should I have done differently? Because the editing informs the shooting informs the editing. They're two sides of the same coin to getting a good image at the end of the day. And I think that, like you're talking about low contrast, less is often more, right? And in low contrast, if you expose to the right, you might wind up with something that's not even going to be all that editable, right? You just sort of expose it so that it's on either side of that mid-tone line so that you can work with it. And I find that the latest sensors and the latest cameras are pretty good at figuring that out for you if you just roll with them. It's been interesting watching that evolution of how our cameras are handling it, But I think that, the point being, whatever it is that you like to shoot, if you do what Rick said and you get out there, even if you've only got 50 images, you start trying to edit that second one because it looks good to you and you spend an hour on it and it's time to go to dinner and then you need to go to bed and then work the next day. You come back and you still feel like, oh, I haven't even culled through this yet. And then, like Rick said, you find that the 5th image was way better than the second one. You should have never started on that second one. It's just important to think of the whole process holistically and to be able to drill down, find a technique that works for you to drill down and find the images to edit in the beginning so that you're not wasting a lot of time on images you should never be working with.
I think, there are a bunch of people whose goals for 2023 are, to get better at the editing aspect of things. For both, we tend to have, mostly Lightroom, Photoshop, and on-one users, and I see a lot of that. When we talk about editing, you talk about revelations that we had this year. Adobe's masking in Lightroom and Photoshop or ACR, the enhancements they made there, and the enhancements that On1 made with their AI-based masking tools, have been a stunning revelation to me. They really are revolutionary. And if I've told a couple people already, who I talk to workshop alumni, and it's like spending time with those tools and learning how to mask. I mean, masking 10 years ago was a pain in the ass.
Yep.
It was a dark art.
Yes, it was a dark art.
Yeah.
And these companies have done an amazing job in refining
Simplifying.
masking and making it to a point where it's simple. And I'll just give you a quick example. So this year for Christmas, for my daughter and my daughter-in-law, I printed 200 photos, 5x7 photos for them, family photos that go back with my daughter decades. And it was like I was just doing it was production line. And the masking in Lightroom made that. One of my goals was I'm going to print 400 photos, but I don't want to have to edit every damn photo. I mean, these are really snapshots. But the masking in Photoshop was so amazing. All I had to do is like click on a photo, do select subject, and then with that, either bring them out a bit or invert it and darken the background. I mean, I was working on these images and it was literally like a minute before I would go in and I do this, and they're all subtle stuff, but they made the photographs better. And on one is getting there. I mean, the jumps they've made just in the last like mini versions, like .1 and .2 of their 23 product, have gotten so much better, and they're only gonna get better. And if I think here in office hours, but also in our workshops, we've talked about how editing really is not supposed to be global. Editing is really supposed to be localized, that you should be looking at different aspects of your image and editing those differently. And with the new masking tools, it makes this stuff so much easier. It makes a linear gradient, which we've had for 8 or 9 years, feel like a jackhammer, compared to some of the tools that we have right now for selecting things. And I would say if you really, if you're looking for a post-processing goal for 2023, it would be to really dive into those masking things and work on getting better at that localized editing process. A lot of images. Say
that in the latter half of 2022's workshops, we started, we make a point of doing image reviews, every day whenever possible. We look at images from the previous day from everyone. And, Lightroom has made it so much simpler. We're getting these nice big JPEGs, projecting them up on a nice calibrated screen, and looking at them and saying, oh, you know what you could do, and using those masking tools with everyone sitting in the room watching on their own images and saying, well, you just select sky here, or you select subject, invert, darken the background a little bit. And you see everybody was just, we could have done that for hours and hours and hours and hours. And so every day just taking a few where you're like, well, this would really make this image pop a little bit, and showing how easy it is to use these tools now, I think was some of everyone's favorite part of the workshops in general. And it's like you said, Rick, these days, before I shoot off pics of the family to grandpa and grandma in Florida, I'm just grabbing select subject, invert, darken the background to touch, and it's like literally a 20-second move that suddenly makes the image look as if it's studio lit, even though it was a shot with my cell phone on the mountain.
Right.
It's just, And I think we've preached a lot about editing with a light touch, the raw processing, set the black point, set the white point, adjust the shadows, adjust the highlights, add a little contrast, be subtle with our basic raw processing. Well, now you can choose how to be subtle with your subject as opposed to your background, or your sky as opposed to your foreground, with just a couple of extra clicks. And it really is powerful. And I think people should be thinking about it.
Yeah. So. And I would, one last note, we've talked about this probably more than we need to, but in that context, again, of we've all got these huge photo libraries that go back years, right? Go back and look, pick a year, go back and look at your images in 2013 and look at them with a fresh eye. Okay. And yeah, you're going to find a lot of stuff where you're like, God, what was I doing? But you're going to find photos that still have resonance for you, and the raw processing from 2010 to 2012 was great, but the engines have developed so much more that you can go back and you can re-edit some of those old images and, get to the point where what you really wanted to see in that final photograph, you can do now much more easily than you could have back then.
Absolutely.
Finding some of my old Canon 5D photos, initial 5D, and re-editing them with, the current versions of the raw processors has been an amazing experience for me over the last couple of years. So again, in terms of thinking about things you can do to sort of help enhance your post-production skills, that's another one. And it also, serves the purpose of you walking through old portions of your library and finding those gems. Don't think about it from the standpoint of, oh my God, I was a crappy photographer. Think about it from the standpoint of, I was developing my eye and there are photos in this time period that are in the service of that have come along with me over the years. So
I love Mark Smith's latest comment. I finally hit the point where I think it's too saturated. A milestone, I think.
We're playing office hours bingo. I think we just scored.
Yeah. Mark's goals for 2023 were, I've had enough of the gear acquisition and instead want to spend my dollars to put myself in locations where I want to take photographs.
There you go.
And I think that's we all get caught up in gear, and I admit that I just got caught up in gear again.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that and then approaching the scene quicker.
But
no, Rick's not going Nikon. He's just switching Sony bodies. So.
No, but I think I actually saw that in quite a few of the goals that people were talking about doing for 2023. This sort of, going to the places that have resonance for you, or the places that you want to shoot. And I'm not talking about going on workshops. I'm talking about going into places where you've been before, or where they're close enough to your home. Mark, you and I talked about the King Tides next month, and I'm thinking I need to find time to go out and shoot that, and was going to send you an email later on this week, to see if you were interested in it, and it's again, it's that thing about getting out and shooting, going and shooting, and you come back and okay, so you have 30 photos that you took with your camera that you're like, nah, none of them speak to me, but hopefully you find one that's at least interesting. I've been doing that around town. I've been taking my camera, just walking around town. I don't feel like my town is a particularly great place to shoot, but there are things to shoot. And I come back with images that I'm like, oh, okay, I like this. It's not going to be in my portfolio. I might print it, but that's about it. So, I think going out and planning some sort of photo thing. And again, I'll throw out that, maybe there's someone in town that you've shot with occasionally, or that is interested in photography. Maybe you go out and shoot with them. Talking about photography with other people is immensely helpful. It's immensely helpful. So
I think that is very, very true in photography as it is in music. It's good to surround yourself with people with similar interests, but surround yourself with people that are better than you.
Yes. That's why I'm always out there shooting with you, David. Oh, you think I'm joking? I am not joking. I am not joking.
And it's really the proximity principle. You put yourself around people who are doing what you want to do.
Yeah.
And in photography, you can go with people, they can show you their locations.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah. On an
you know, and
informal basis.
Bruce, my good friend Bruce asked, it was not so much a goal, it was he was asking, you know, what's the one skill that most of your workshop attendees need to most to work on? And my response would be an open mind to come and spend 4 days or 5 days or 6 days, basically immersed in photography with a group of people who are also immersed in photography. I think that's if I were to pick, say, one thing that comes out of these workshops, it's that we rarely get the opportunity to go out and just basically eat, sleep, and breathe photography for a period of time with a bunch of other people who are eating, sleeping, and breathing photography. You know, people are
it's a
all
blast.
What?
Yeah, it's a blast and it's exhausting, but you come out of it so re-energized. That group dynamic where we're all round the clock focused with our camera in our hand and talking about what we're doing, or our computer at our fingertips looking through what we're doing, it's amazing.
Yeah, and you can do that with 2 or 3 people, you know, in your
Yes.
area. I mean, that used to be, I mean, sadly, one of the things that I think the last 20 to 30 years has done is it sort of, you know, led to a decline in the camera clubs of old, right?
Yeah.
You know, because we're all sharing stuff online and, you know, it's all digital. But, you know, I remember a number of camera clubs that, you know, where it was like, you know, people would become friends and they would go off shooting on a Saturday somewhere, or go shooting for a weekend, or just go walk the town, you know, and then end up and have dinner. That's kind of what we had. We had kind of an informal camera club of our own. It's hard, I think, to become a better photographer totally in a backroom. I think it's hard to do that.
I agree.
I think you can learn. I think you can, and you know, I'm sure there are exceptions, but I think, you know, being with people who are like-minded, even if you shoot completely different things, you know, and being able to talk about them and look at other work and say, oh, I didn't see that, I think is an amazing thing to do.
Yeah.
And people that know local spots that you might not know as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
For example, there's Magnolia Plantation in Charleston where we go frequently. There's a guy who goes there every single day, and he'll tell you exactly where the eagle has been seen, exactly where this and that are, and is willing to walk you over there and show it to you. And it's so valuable.
Yeah.
You know, people share their information with each other. It's a great thing when it's done. Musicians aren't as good about that. They're a lot of times musicians are more competitive with each other. I guess maybe because they're struggling for the same gigs and things, but
yeah. And I'm sure, you know, from a professional photography situation, it's probably very similar. If you're among 12 people capturing an event, you know, and you want to make sure you get the right spot to shoot the stage or shoot this person or whatever, I'm sure it's a little bit more competitive. But you know, I've in every workshop that I've done and in all the sort of impromptu photo walks and stuff that I've done over the years, I've never encountered a situation where I felt like someone was being ultra competitive, you know, with everyone else.
No.
You know, so let's see. I mean, a lot of the comments that people had were sort of, you know, I want to spend more time picking up my camera. I want to learn how to use it better.
I saw one person said they wanted to be able to get as acquainted with their camera to the point where they didn't need to take their eye out of the viewfinder to change every function and setting that they needed. And I thought that's a really good goal. You know, that's something that I think is so valuable when you keep a piece of gear around long enough that it becomes like an old shoe and you really are comfortable with it. It makes it easier to react in a moment when something fleeting and beautiful is happening and you're not trying to figure out how to get into what menu setting to change your focus to get what you need for the shot. You know, it is a good goal, I think, to get to the point where you know where every button is without looking at it. and can work with your camera in the dark, you know.
I think it's a good goal. I think
Yeah.
the idea that every function my camera does, I need to know to be able to do that. in the
Well, I'm
dark.
not, you know, don't take me
you know.
too verbatim. You know, I
Well,
mean,
but
the
some
general
people
ones
do.
that you need to adjust. Yeah.
Some people do. I mean, I've run into people who are like, I don't know this well enough. And it's like, you need to know your camera well enough for the type of photography you wish to shoot.
Indeed. Yeah.
If you're going to work, if you're interested in astro, for example,
Right.
you do need to know, what you're going to need to do in the dark for shooting. I mean, you're going to,
Mhm.
if you're interested in shooting faster moving subjects, you really do need to understand, how to sort of master the continuous autofocus modes in your camera, which ones are the most reasonable for you to use in this situation or that situation.
Well,
And the whole idea of understanding customization of your camera,
Mhm.
the big thing that all the mirrorless cameras have are custom buttons.
Mhm.
And we see this all the time. There's all sorts of people, yourself included, who have, these are my settings for this camera, and these are the custom button settings, and people go and just install those without really thinking about the way that they work. And I think that if you're shooting landscapes, setting up the custom buttons for those types of situations, if that's the thing you like most, do that.
I get people requesting all the time that I just put the bin file with my settings out there so they can download it and restore those settings onto their own camera, and I refuse vehemently on the principle that if you don't take the time to run through and listen to me explain why I make each change, then decide whether or not that makes sense for you, then all it's going to do is make your camera more complicated, and there will be no manual to why it's working the way it's working,
Yeah.
And we've actually encountered a workshop attendee in the field who had a camera where they had downloaded someone's settings and just installed them. And it was a camera that Rick should have known how to work with, but nothing was working like you expected it to. And we basically had to reset it to factory defaults.
Yeah.
So,
I'm a firm believer in the whole custom settings thing, and I'm as much a firm believer in don't really set those buttons up until you've used your camera enough where you're like, okay, I keep doing this, and man, would be great to have this on a custom function.
right.
And that's
At
where
least understand.
yeah, and that's where you get to that point where you can shoot with your eye to the viewfinder and know, oh, right, yeah, C3.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, C4.
Yep.
So
What were you going to say,
I don't.
Darren?
Well, it's like, I know why you do some of the settings the way you do them, and I know they don't work for me
Right.
because of what I'm doing. But it takes the practice and understanding what the settings are
Right.
to do it. Slavishly copying what Hudson or Tom Hogan or Ken Rockwell or anybody on the internet says is the way to go
Mhm.
may not help you, may
Right.
hinder you.
Right.
Let me see.
We had somebody ask whether in our workshops we caravan versus riding together, and I'll just quickly say we ride together. That's the reason for having LFA, the big sprinter, the school bus of everybody working together along having that group thing is really important to us.
Yeah, and we do, when we have 12-person workshops, we can't fit everybody in Hefe, so we tend to rent another van. And it's rare to have a workshop, at least the one I can remember in the last couple of years, where we didn't have someone driving a vehicle.
Yeah, if people want to drive, then that's always your option. But
yeah,
the school bus environment is a great way to group cohese.
yeah. And one thing that you might want to think about, we've talked about this in the past, but it's always good to mention. I see a lot of people talking about, learning, they'd like to get better at composition, or they'd like to know their lenses better, or this type of thing. The simple element of putting a single lens on your camera, a prime, or a zoom if that's all you've got, but setting it at a set focal length and just walking around and shooting with it for a while. And it causes you to think differently about composition and setup and where you stand and all that sort of stuff. I think that's a great, just sort of like little practice thing you can do. And then you get in those places where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, and this is what I need to do. I want this lens or I want that lens.
Yep.
I've been practicing for the Cuba workshops with just wandering around with my 35mm lens on,
Mhm.
and just shooting with that, because that's probably what I'm going to be shooting with in Cuba. So
I think it is important to practice
Oh,
To-
yeah.
yeah,
with the goal, same as music, playing guitar. If you're trying to play a song or play with other people, you can't really be thinking about, now, what was that scale? What's that shape? It has to become automatic, and then you can think about the other things. Well, same with camera. You have to know your basic settings, and then you can think about composition.
right.
And light and the direction of the wind and what the background is and things like that. If you're not having to think about, now let's see, what's the difference between shutter speed and aperture? What do those numbers mean? And
Mm-hmm.
How do I change my ISO again? Yeah.
and I think there are a lot of parallels between the two.
Yeah. I mean, there a bunch of people, talked about goals.
It's frozen on us.
Ken wanted to spend more time with, doing long exposure work, and we've had some other people who wanted to do better at nighttime blue hour photography, and really the only way to do that is to go out and practice it, and you'll find, go to a place where it might not even be terribly pretty, but it gives you the conditions that you want: a river, waterfall, or a nice expanse of night sky, and you just go and you shoot, just practice, and I'd almost argue that in some of those instances you don't go shoot 1,000 photos, you shoot 50, and you go back and you go through them and you look, and which did I accomplish what I wanted? The whole long exposure photography and waterfalls and rivers it's fascinating. You go spend hours doing that type of stuff, and then when you get to that time when you're in front of a beautiful waterfall or a river or a scene where you're like, this is the one I want, you've had that practice to sort of help you get there. So.
And if you're thoughtful about it and have goals and focus on different things, pretty soon you'll have 10 years experience in photography.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you might have 1 year experience 10 times.
So well put, David. That's really, really well put. And earlier Rick talked about, you go out and you walk around and you shoot 50 images, and maybe the light wasn't great or no subjects jumped out at you, and maybe you find one that's worth kind of exploring a little bit. But even if there isn't an image from the whole day and you wind up coming back and you do that culling process and there's nothing you really want to edit, you learn something. Every time you're out there,
Yeah.
You learn something. And if instead you wait until you've got that big trip, in the spring to Namibia, and your camera just sits for the 3 months in between, you're not practicing, you're not learning, and you're going to have to remember how to use your equipment and your photographic vision and brain all over again when you get there. And you'll lose the first few days to like, I forgot how to do that.
Yeah.
If instead you're even just taking pictures of your cats or your grandchildren or the woods behind your home or the streets outside your apartment, you're practicing and you're sharp and you're ready to go when the time's right. And I think that's just key to it all,
And I will say one last thing, and which is, right now in the Northern Hemisphere is some of the most beautiful light we get all year. Winter light is amazing, and it's very short. And and I've been so many places in this country over the years at this time of year, and the light is beautiful pretty much everywhere. Think about that, as over the next few days, because when January hits and the weather, starts to change, you lose that. It literally is those couple of weeks around the solstice that are just, the light is stunning.
It is.
All right. Well,
Right, everybody.
we've wasted another good hour of everyone's time. For that, we apologize.
It will never get back.
We hope you all have good holidays. Remember, next office hours is the 10th of January.
Yep.
And, sort of go through your library of photos from this year, and, submit one that you feel represents you, or is your favorite or your best. Woody will have the submission page up soon, and we'll sort of walk through the gallery on the 10th. And Woody is raising his hand.
I'm gonna go all of next year without crashing Zoom before the show. That was a catastrophe. Sorry, everyone.
That's all right.
I
Okay.
should probably be trained on how to take over for Woody if he has a
Please.
technical like that.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
That was a
I'm like,
saddle up fast, buckaroo. Go.
All right, everybody. Well, you take care. Happy New Year, and we'll see you on the 10th.